Welcome back to Fantasy Football Today, presented by BetMGM. Make it legendary. We're talking about wide receivers for Week 14 and the guys you need to start, the guys you need to sit, and hopefully some guys that we feel a little bit more confident in. There are some guys that we're a little bit concerned about where to rank them, and we'll start there. We'll show you the rank list 1 through 12, and I don't think any concerns with these guys, although just keep an eye on the situation with Arizona because Marvin Harrison Jr. once again did not practice on Thursday, dealing with that heel injury. So we'll see if he's going to get out there. If not, Michael Wilson, all systems go. But Greg Dortch also did not practice, so keep an eye on that, dealing with a chest injury. Chris Olave battling a back situation, something to monitor there. But for the most part, we feel great about these guys. When you get to the next list, 13 through 24, then we start to get to some questions. So we'll show you those players from a ranking perspective, and we'll talk about some of these guys, starting with a guy, Heath, that is going to be close on this list, and that's Zay Flowers. So tough to trust. I know Dave wants to sit him this week, so right. Dave's not really welcome to the city of Baltimore right now, not liking Lamar Jackson and Zay Flowers. But where do you come out on Flowers just from the standpoint of, is he trustworthy?
Well, it's interesting because I think we think of him as like this boom-bust wide receiver, and we certainly got the bust last week, even though I think his touchdown should have counted. But if you look at the prior 7 weeks, it was about the most consistent wide receiver in fantasy football. It was between 11 and 14 points every single week. Now, he didn't score a touchdown in any of those games. That's generally the type of guy that I would be saying, yeah, you start this guy. Eventually, he's going to score a touchdown. But it's been since week 1 since he scored a touchdown. I feel a lot about him like I do Lamar Jackson. There's FOMO for sure, because he has the ability. He's had multiple 25-point fantasy days in his young career. And there seems to be, besides 1 week, a pretty reasonable floor of 11 to 14 fantasy points. That sounds like a starter.
That sounds like a flex more than a starter.
Not a wide receiver this year.
Well, maybe, but there are a bunch of other wide.
It sounds like Khalil Shakir is what it sounds like, essentially.
Sort of. Yeah. And I just don't think he's got the same type of upside as other wide receivers do, especially in this matchup against Pittsburgh, because the last 3 times he's played against them hasn't been any better than 15.3 PPR points. And 15.3 from Zay Flowers, I would love that, but he's been as low as 11.9. So to Heath's point, he's been right in that range of around 11, 13 PPR points. That's a good flex at wide receiver, and that's what I would think of him as. It's how I have him ranked. He's good, he's not great, and I think I can find some other guys. Christian Watson, Alec Pierce, more upside. I'm starting them. Michael Wilson, Jameson Williams, of course I'm starting those guys ahead of Zay Flowers.
And those make sense just from the standpoint of what their upside is. You know, the downside is probably a little bit lower than Zay Flowers, so you know what Heath was saying about Lamar Jackson, depending on what you need. I just think you kind of know what Flowers is at this point, and the lack of touchdowns, again, last week notwithstanding, but the lack of touchdowns, just very frustrating. So hopefully Lamar gets going. We get Zay Flowers going as well. Matchup is actually very good. We just have seen a lot of teams have to throw against the Steelers lately, but understandably so. We have Flowers in a very similar range here. Sportsline is very excited about Flowers at number 14. Dave, a guy that you're concerned about or tough to rank is Deebo Samuel.
So I went back and I looked at all the different situations, and this is with Marcus Mariota at quarterback. It changes if it's Jane Daniels, but all the different types of situations, scenario coverages that Deebo Samuel's target per route rate has been, and when has he gotten a high target per route run rate. And with Mariota, the only time when Deebo Samuel has had a high target per route run rate is when Mariota is getting the ball out quick. 2.5 seconds or fewer. He's seeing a target on 32% of his routes. They're not downfield. They're very short, but that's when he's getting involved. And what do the Vikings do? They get after the quarterback. So even though I think that he could see a lot of targets in this game, I'm not sure if he's going to be capable of breaking a bunch of them for big plays, especially with Terry McLaurin back. I'm nervous about how good he can be. So he's in that flex range for me, too. As a matter of fact, I like Zay Flowers better than I like Deebo Samuel this week. So it makes me tough. It's tough to trust him, especially if I'm going to look at him and say, okay, this is going to be a good week for him. I don't know if it's going to be that, especially with McLaurin back. And what about the week that Zach Ertz has? That throws a wrench into the whole thing because he could end up taking target volume away from Deebo Samuel as a short area target.
Minnesota's number 2 in fewest fantasy points allowed to opposing wide receivers, and McLaurin, 3 games with Deebo Samuel. Samuel's best game was last 3 games with McLaurin, 11.1 PPR points. And that's in a game where Mariota threw 50 times. I don't know if we're going to see 50 pass attempts from Marcus Mariota against this Vikings defense.
Yeah, so that makes me like him even less.
Yeah, it's tough. And I know we're looking at McLaurin as, okay, we'll just throw him right back in there. And I think you should, just based on the upside, because his last 2 games against Denver, fantastic. Against Kansas City was very good, too. What Minnesota has done, certainly in game flow matters, but the last 3 teams they faced, Green Bay, Chicago, and Seattle, no wide receiver, double digits in PPR. That's including Jackson Smith-Njigba, who's been the best wide receiver in fantasy. Let's have a quick Justin Jefferson conversation because he's the toughest guy for me to rank this week. comes in as a low-end number 2 receiver. This feels like a great blow-up spot for him, except his quarterback blows up, and that's unfortunate, in J.J. McCarthy. So he's just been bad, and we know that's the big reason why Jefferson, for the most part, has struggled. 6+ targets in every game so far this season. At one point, we were saying, it's 9+ targets in every game this season.
Right.
But Washington is 5th in terms of most fantasy points allowed to opposing wide receivers. We see almost every number 1 wide receiver, last week was Courtland Sutton, just go off against this team. Can Jefferson have one of those weeks? Do you feel confident about that, Heath? Because you have him the highest ranked at 16.
No, not confident at all. I think there may be a few more guys that you guys feel like you like than I do.
Alec Pierce and Christian Watson.
Yeah,
right,
right.
like those types of guys that I'm just still starting Justin Jefferson ahead of them. I do think that there is a chance against Washington that J.J. McCarthy maybe has like 180-yard game. And so it's 8 for 90 for Justin Jefferson or something like that. I think we probably get a little bit too certain about especially quarterbacks starting their first year and just they're going to be this awful every game. And Justin Jefferson's still awesome. So when I go through and look at the rankings and I've got a choice between Justin Jefferson or Alec Pierce, I don't have that choice because I've got Pierce quite a bit lower. But I'm just going to go with the guy that's named Justin Jefferson.
And I think that's what most people will do when they see their lineups.
Sure.
So you'll see maybe projections that say Pierce over Jefferson. You'll see rankings that have Pierce over Jefferson. And you're going to be like, am I really stealing Justin Jefferson for Alec Pierce, despite the fact that he's been better, despite the fact
You've done that last week.
And it's the same thing with Lamar Jackson, same thing with Patrick Mahomes. When we say avoid or sit or be concerned about these guys, you don't listen. We understand that. But that's what, we're hoping to lead you to the right, direction here and give you the right suggestion. But I get it. So where most people come out not trusting those guys. But we'll talk about some starts now. And one of these guys is Christian Watson, who's been better than Justin Jefferson for the last month. Will he do it again?
It's a great matchup for Jordan Love. I talked about earlier, the Bears don't get after the quarterback, and when Love has time to throw, what does he do? He goes downfield. And the other thing that the Bears do a lot of is play man-to-man coverage, especially in close games or when they're trailing. And in those situations, talking about target per route run rate again, Christian Watson sees a target 33.3% of the time. That is ridiculously high, and it makes total sense because if he's in a one-on-one situation, he's usually running past somebody, and Jordan Love, all he has to do is just get the ball in the vicinity near him, and hopefully he comes down with it. Usually they go for a touchdown. That's been the target per route run rate since Tucker Kraft has gone out because Kraft used to be that guy. Now it's not. It's Christian Watson. He looks good. I think he's the number 2 fantasy wide receiver. I would take the chance on him against Chicago.
And we all have him ranked in the top 21, so great opportunity for Christian Watson. Let's talk Terry McLaurin because, again, matchup's not easy.
The matchup isn't easy, but I think the fact that he played 46% of the snaps last week and still led the team with a 31% target share tells you he's back. I think you were really right about him at the beginning of the season. The holdout really derailed his season, it seems. He got hurt, couldn't get healthy. I think he's healthy right now. When Terry McLaurin's healthy, you start him.
Yep, and again, what he did against Denver was amazing because that's one of the best secondaries. What he did against Kansas City, not a huge game, but did score a touchdown there. And both those did come with Marcus Mariota, so we make it a boost if even Jaden Daniels starts. So hopefully we get another big game from Terry McLaurin. Again, you see we all have him ranked as a number 2 wide receiver. Jakobi Meyers has been very good for the Jaguars the last 3 weeks, and that's only been with 6 targets. But we're looking at a Colts defense, no Sauce Gardner, well aware, dealing with that calf injury. We've seen Myers score a touchdown each of the last 2 weeks. No Parker Washington, at least that's the expectation, dealing with that hip injury. So I'm hoping we get a little bit of a up-tempo game here between the Jaguars and the Colts, and we see the Jaguars have to throw a little bit more because Trevor Lawrence been living under 30 pass attempts for the majority of the second half of the season so far, certainly the last 2 weeks. But when he has to throw, this is a guy I think he's going to lean on quite a bit. So a number 2 wide receiver, Dave's a little bit lower, just outside that top 24 range, but somebody that we all like as a number 2 wide receiver for this week. Some guys that we're looking to avoid. So Heath, you brought up a great point on our podcast this morning about the difference in what's happening in Denver. Courtland Sutton's fine, but the number 2 receiver, we might be seeing a shift between Troy Franklin and Pat Bryant.
Sean Payton is Sean Paytoning once again. Last week, we saw Pat Bryant play more snaps than Troy Franklin, run more routes than Troy Franklin, and see twice as many targets as Troy Franklin. It was a 4 or 5 week stretch where Troy Franklin was seeing a bunch more targets than Courtland Sutton. This is kind of what Sean Payton does. It's just throughout the season, it ebbs and flows. Franklin, I'm not sure at this point that he's in the doghouse, but he's certainly not the guy we thought he was a couple of weeks ago when he was their clear number 1 option in the passing game. And there is a risk that he's just a 50-60% snap share guy in this game, that Bryant's actually the better option, and that you don't even want to start him as a top 36 wide receiver. I think there was 3 weeks ago, we actually had him ahead of Sutton for 1 week in the rankings. That's not the case anymore at all.
No, you can't do that anymore. However, I do think that Troy Franklin, this is just based on the track record of the season, has much better games against 1 high safety defenses versus 2 high. And last week the Commanders, and really they've changed the way that they play defense with Dan Quinn calling the shots. They played with a lot of 2 high, and I think Sean Payton saw that and decided this isn't for Troy Franklin. When it's a single high safety, his target per route run rate goes way up, his efficiency goes way up, and what do the Raiders play a ton of? Single high safety, cover 3 especially, and he's had his best numbers against cover 3. That's why I have him ranked as high as I do as a flex, as a number 3 type of wide receiver in the 30s. I don't want to put him any higher than that in case there has been a real change, but I do think he's worth trying one more time as a flex.
And let's just be honest here. They played this team in Week 10, and they were miserable throwing the football. Bo Nix was awful. It was at home where he's typically awesome. And the Raiders, look, their pass defense has been very Jekyll and Hyde. At some points, they look great. They do a great job against tight ends, for example. I don't know how much you want to necessarily trust the entire passing attack here for Denver, so I think that plays into it because Courtland Sutton looked a little bit better than he has in recent weeks last week. But to your point, maybe this is a matchup situation, a game flow situation, and we see a good performance for Troy Franklin. But I understand why there's some trepidation to clearly start him. All right, so you're going to sit Zay Flowers. We talked about that. For me, I'm going to try and get away from Roman Dunze. Very difficult, again, on a week where we have 4 teams on a bye and some of the receiver situations that we're dealing with. But 8.3 PPR points or less in 4 of his last 5 games. As we've sort of illustrated, we expect a lot of running from the Bears. Caleb Williams not necessarily asked to win this game. Now, if they're trailing, that certainly helps with Dunze, but he's been 6+ targets almost every game this season. So the production has just not been there despite the volume and still being the go-to guy for the Bears. But Colston Loveland stepped up recently. Luther Burden's going to be getting more involved. And again, really, I just think it's going to be a running attack for Chicago, and the pass defense for the Packers still very good. Going to make things uncomfortable for Caleb Williams. So I don't want to trust Romo Dunze in a 2-receiver league. Clearly, you're starting him in 3-receiver leagues, but if you can get away from him, that's the right move to make. All right, we're going to take a break right now. We come back and get into the tight ends. We still have your questions coming up, so send them to us on social media using the hashtag AskFFT. But tight ends are next here on Fantasy Football Today.